There's a detail that shows up in almost every missing person case, over and over again, and it's not the one you'd expect. It's not a strange car. It's not a suspicious stranger. It's not a dramatic struggle caught on camera. It's something much smaller, much quieter, and much easier to miss. And once you know what it is, you'll never scroll past a missing person post the same way again. It's the timeline gap. Not the moment someone disappears. The moment right before that. The one nobody thinks to ask about until it's too late. The last few hours where a person's normal, predictable pattern quietly stops matching what actually happened. And almost every time, in almost every case, that gap is smaller than people assume, and far easier to overlook than people assume. Here's how it usually plays out, and this is a composite of patterns investigators describe again and again, not any single case. Someone doesn't show up for a shift, or doesn't answer a text, or doesn't post the way they normally post. At first, nobody worries. People are late. People go quiet. People need a day to themselves. That first stretch of silence, the one everyone waves off, is exactly the window investigators call the most valuable and the most commonly wasted. Law enforcement agencies actually have a name for this. It's sometimes referred to informally as the golden hours, a documented principle in missing persons work that says the earlier a case is treated seriously, the higher the chance of a safe recovery, because evidence, memory, and location data all degrade fast. Surveillance footage gets overwritten. People's memories of "did I see them Tuesday or Wednesday" blur. Cell tower data becomes harder to pin to an exact window. Every hour that passes with someone assuming they're probably fine is an hour that data is quietly disappearing.
And this is the detail nobody thinks about until they're the one filling out a report. The person who could have said something first is almost always the person closest to the missing individual, and that person almost always waits. Not out of carelessness, out of the very human instinct not to overreact. Nobody wants to be the person who called the police because their friend didn't text back for 6 hours. Nobody wants to feel dramatic. So the gap grows. A missed dinner becomes a missed morning, becomes a missed full day, and by the time someone finally says the sentence, "I think something's wrong," the timeline that could have been reconstructed with precision has already gone soft at the edges. This is why one of the most repeated pieces of advice from investigators, search and rescue coordinators, and missing persons advocacy groups is almost embarrassingly simple. If a routine breaks and it feels wrong, you say something immediately. Not after 24 hours, not after you've convinced yourself you're overreacting, the moment it feels wrong. Filing a report early costs nothing. There's a common myth that police won't take a report until 24 or 48 hours have passed, but that's not accurate, and most departments actively encourage immediate reporting, especially for anyone considered high risk or out of character for their routine. The second overlooked detail lives inside your phone, and it's one most people have never thought about because it only matters in the worst case scenario. Location history.
Not the dramatic movie version of tracking someone, just the quiet, boring settings most phones have built in by default. Investigators regularly describe how a person's own device becomes one of the fastest ways to reconstruct a timeline, because most phones log approximate location in the background, whether or not someone's actively sharing it with anyone. The problem isn't that the data doesn't exist. The problem is that almost nobody knows where it's stored, how to access it quickly, or that they should check it themselves before waiting on someone else to. Here's a fact worth remembering, because it's simple and it's real. Knowing how to access your own device's location history and knowing how to help someone else access theirs is one of the single most useful things you can do before anything ever goes wrong. Not because you're expecting the worst.
Because a habit built in calm moments is the only kind of habit that actually works in a panicked one. The third overlooked detail is the one that gets the least attention of all, and it's the pattern before the pattern. Investigators and behavioral analysts who study missing persons cases often point out that a disappearance is rarely the first sign that something changed. There's frequently a smaller shift beforehand, a person pulling back from regular contact, changing their usual routine, becoming harder to reach in small, easy-to-rationalize ways. On its own, none of that means anything. People get busy, people go through phases. But when you're looking backward, after the fact, that quiet pulling away shows up again and again in retrospective timelines. And almost nobody flags it while it's happening, because in the moment, it just looks like someone being a little distant. This is the uncomfortable part of the whole subject. None of these details are secret. None of them require special training to understand. They're small, mundane, easy to overlook precisely because they don't feel like warning signs while they're happening. A late text, a quiet week,
a missed check-in that everyone assumes will resolve itself. And most of the time, it does resolve itself. That's worth saying plainly, because this isn't about assuming the worst every time someone goes quiet. It's about understanding why. In the cases where it didn't resolve itself, the people closest to that person often say some version of the same thing afterward. I should have said something sooner. I told myself I was overreacting. So here's the actual practical takeaway, the part that matters more than any of the unsettling framing around it. Build the habit before you need it. Know how to check location sharing on the phones of the people closest to you, and make sure they know how to check yours.
Agree explicitly with the people in your life that if a routine breaks in a way that feels wrong, you say something the same day, not after you've talked yourself out of it. Treat that instinct, the quiet nagging one that something doesn't add up, as data, not paranoia. Because the detail that gets overlooked first isn't hidden. It isn't buried in some file investigators uncover weeks later. It's sitting in plain sight, in the hours right before anyone realized there was anything to worry about, waiting for someone to trust the feeling that something was off instead of waiting for proof. Trust it a little sooner next time.